Hello, attendees. Welcome. We're so glad you're all here. We're going to let a few more people join in before we get started, but welcome and thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Yeah. We're going to go up until maybe we have 10, 12 attendees, and then we will get started. Hi, everyone. You are joining the DIY Native Language Assessment session. We're just going to let a few more people join in, and then we'll get started in just a second. All righty. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is the last day of the Office of Indian Education Project Directors meeting. You are attending the DIY Native Language Assessment. Before we move forward, let's go ahead and get disclaimed.
This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred.
Awesome. So now that we've got disclaimed, let's look at what we will be covering today in this session. Here are our session objectives. The first one really is to identify new strategies for assessment development and administration, and then also to learn how to review assessment data and reflect on your program improvement process. And to take us through, we have invited the Navajo Preparatory School 2 staff members. This program is an OIE NOL at ED grantee, and they're going to be sharing how they have been working on developing their own native language assessments. Our 2 presenters are Dara Tabram. She is the Dean of Students and Community Engagement at Navajo Preparatory Academy School, as well as Kevin Belin. He's the Director of Dene Bizad Institute. Welcome.
Hello, thank you, Alani.
Okay, go ahead. You can begin.
Thank you,
Okay.
Jelani.
Sure.
That's Dar Tabram Yunishe, Belagana Nishle, Belagana Bushishchin, Belagana Dashache, Belagana Dashanale, Ado New Zealand Denasha. My name is Dara Tabram. I'm the Dean of Student and Community Engagement here at Navajo Preparatory School. I'm also the project director for all of our OIE grants. And so I'm really excited to be here with you today to help share my perspective as one of the project directors, but also really showcase the work of Mr. Belin, who's our director of the Dene Bizad Institute. Kevin?
Yes. Yeah, Kodich need the net okay, but it's chain kind of stuff in the churches and it's other native that and the child had it in support. I think I it's a case so none. Just like to welcome you guys to our session. My name is Kevin Belin. I'm the director of the Dene Bizad Institute. I'm from the Navajo Nation and just really appreciate you guys here. So as the director of the Dene Bizad Institute, I oversee the language and culture programs at our school here. There you go.
And if I can add it, we were really grateful for our OIE funding, grant funding, which helped us to begin this position of the directorship. It helped us to take Mr. Belin, who is one of our amazing Navajo language teachers, and put him into this leadership role where he could support curriculum advancement for the entire department and school.
Thank you, Dara. Okay, so when we look at assessments and what Navajo Prep, the assessment policies that we have and the overlying assessment makers that we have to adhere to, we have the Department of Education. So you'll see that throughout the presentation as DODE, and I'll refer to it often as DODE. Okay, that's just what, the acronyms that we use. The second one is OSCAD, which is the Office of School Curriculum and Development. This is also under Office of Standards, Curriculum, and Assessment Development. So that is also under DODE. And so those are the two main departments that we take our assessments from. So there are three main assessment types that we administer through these two entities. The first is the DLPA, the Language Proficiency Assessment. And that is taken 2 times a year, generally around October to November is when we administer that assessment. And then the post-assessment we administer around March. We did take these 2 assessments. We also partake in the ONLC TSBA, the Oral Navajo Language and Culture Assessment. This is a post only that we did partake in this year and last year as well. For our seniors, we also have the NNSOBPA, which is the Navajo Nation Seal Bilingual Proficiency Assessment. And what this does is that it gives a seal Navajo Nation onto our students' diploma and it shows proficiency in both and recognized from the Navajo Nation, and it's recognized, I believe, on the New Mexico, the New Mexico Public Education Department onto their diploma. They also receive additional scholarships through if they are awarded the bilingual seal. And so these are the main overarching policy governmental entities that we adhere to when we do assessments. And this is just their website here. It's just a real quick screenshot just to show you, the resources that they have, assessments, contact, and other things that we need from them. Next one. So part of DODE standards, there are 5 content areas that they want us to touch on throughout the year over the grade level breakdowns. You can see the first grade level breakdowns, pre-K to 3, 4 to 6, 7, 8, and 12. But there's 5 areas per grade level breakdown. So the first is history, culture, language, government, and character development. And we try to, it is required for all schools, BIE schools, and then other schools that receive Navajo funding, and also schools, public schools in and around Navajo, use these standards to help guide their language and culture instruction, okay? So these are our standards. Next slide. When you look on their website, this is just a screenshot of the PDF that they provide. So you can see this is just one of the language standards, 912 oral language. And in Navajo, the Nebazad be do be or in choshin be inst inasato be yashket do be haasid go be niyehegi be kitishinto. So that there, then translated, utilizing Navajo language culture, I'll listen, communicate, observe, and understand appropriately. Then we go down furthermore, concept 1, Sahake. So there's generally four concepts, and they follow the Navajo thought process. Number 1 is thinking, second one's planning, third one's action, fourth one is reflection. Sahake, and it's broken down into these 4 concepts generally. The only one that does not follow this is the government, which has additional standards that are additional concepts that they put into there. So then they have PO1 to PO4. Again, it stays in numbers or increments of 4, and it just stands for primary objective. So you can look at one. Number 1 for 912, I will comprehend the Nembazad spoken to me in school. So I know this is really vague. It can be vague sometimes, but that works to us as instructors as a benefit. We can use this standard throughout the school as part of the community building. We have a lot of our custodial staff, our maintenance staff who are Navajo. And so that could be something that they could use and implement in how we say, is going to be used in school, throughout school, not just in the class period, but throughout because we are a residential school. A lot of our residential advisors, what they used to call dorm aides or dorm assistants, we call residential advisor. They will then use the standard to speak to our students in Navajo and reinforce language learning outside the classroom. So I'll respond physically to complex commands. So this is one that, again, our staff can use, and they do use when they say command terms such as give me this object, give me this thing, go give this to your friend, go give this to Ms. Tabram. And so we do use that language quite a bit, quite often. Number 3 there, I will demonstrate my understanding of oral narratives and authentic stories. So we bring in, we work with our 21st century grant coordinator. She brings in a lot of our presenters, a lot of after school presenters. We also have our Classrooms Without Wall experiences where we bring in presenters. We bring in knowledgeable people in specific areas to speak to our students. And that works perfectly because this primary objective, again, is used not just in the classroom, but throughout the school. I'll identify vocabulary in different contexts. One of the things a teacher that had done, years ago, they went around and labeled a lot of things throughout the campus. So you'd see a fire extinguisher, those things were labeled throughout the school. You can see that I think there was even custodial closet, meaning the person who cleans, this is their broom closet, this is where their tools go. And so we couldn't easily translate words. We had to really expand on the verbs and create those vocabulary terms for us. So again, this is just showing you those standards and how we can and do implement it throughout our school community without even having to document it per se. But again, we are doing this throughout throughout the community. Dara, do you want to speak on this real quick? About community?
Yeah, I just want to really emphasize that in addition to these standards being implemented throughout the language and culture classes, as Kevin mentioned, of course, all staff are aware, and especially Navajo speakers are using these standards to kind of support and guide the conversations with students and other staff. But I think from a structural standpoint of how the school has established its curriculum is that we've required all students to take 4 years of Navajo language and culture. So this is in conjunction with some really strong commitments from the school itself to ensure that our students are having ongoing and continued exposure towards Navajo language. Furthermore, I want to emphasize that not all of our students are Navajo. We have students who are Hickory Apache, we have non-native students, but all students are required to take this coursework as part of their graduation from Navajo Prep. And it's really important for us that all students engage in this way. And I think it's really motivating for some of our Navajo students to see non-Navajo students who are picking up the language as well.
Okay, thank you. Next slide. Here's our Dene Language and Culture team. It's also a department, but we all call ourselves a team because it's not just the teachers. So we have our first teacher, Desmond Tivakani, who teaches Navajo. Then we call, again, another acronym, DLC, Dene Language and Culture 1 and 2. He's also doing traditional art, which is a new course that we've implemented, which is we're focusing on weaving. So students will process raw wool, they'll wash it, they'll spin it and card it, and put that and create their own weaving out of their own rug out of that. And so that's a new course, and this is I think this following year it's going to be a 2-year course for our freshmen and sophomores. Mr. Iwana is our IB Spanish ab initio year 1, year 2, and also teaches Japanese. Kim Vicente is our Dene Language Culture teacher 2 and 4. Dustin Begay, Navajo Culture and Language 3 and 4. Myself in this position, which is newly created with the help of several grants. I believe this grant as well, right, Ms. Tabram? Yes. my position to help oversee the entire department and our team. Lillian Benali, who's our Navajo tutor, has been with us, I think, 10 plus years, really working with her to really support our teachers and bringing them together so that, and I think sometimes there's a disconnect between our teachers and our tutoring staff. And so having them to meet, or having myself meet with them, and ensuring that they have the correct terminology, they have, the vocabulary that they need. We also have Brenda Raymond, who's our Navajo language substitute teacher. Most recently, we really strategically started putting her primarily in the Navajo language class. She is a first language learner and language speaker as well. And so she's our first language speaker. And so she helps us specifically with substituting. So being really strategic, not just in the language department, but also looking how other resources and individuals help to support our program. And so again, Ms. Raymond does substitute for other classes, but again, focusedly as needed when Navajo language courses need to be subbed for the day.
And I think that shows a really big step that we've made at our school to ensure that everybody's on the same page as to the priorities for language and culture. The person who is scheduling our subs understands, like, hey, there's priorities in terms of who is with our students, who's maintaining this face time. I also want to highlight, of course, as a secondary school, we're 9 through 12. Grades 9 through 12, immersion can be really challenging for some of our core classes and core curriculum to be taught in classes other than English. But what we've tried to do is create this system where students have more opportunities for immersive environments. And so, for example, our tutoring staff, our tutor is available from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. Along with our residential advisors, many of whom speak Navajo as well. So we're working to create this environment, not just during the school day, but using the resources of the after school program in the evening hours for our students.
Next slide. So when I first came on as a language teacher 4 years ago, our students initially were taking part in the Rosetta Stone courses, and then also we did have only 2 language teachers at that time. But when I came on, we really began to restructure what our language courses will look like. And between myself and Kim Vincenti, which was again just the 2 of us, we started to come up what are really fundamental Navajo language courses, or what are some units that are specifically that we've taken from the DOTI standards, and we started to put them into categories, and we started to say this is what students need. And so this was really something that helped to really create themes and units for us. And so initially, a lot of this stuff is to be taught in schools, but we also understood that our student population is so diverse. We have students that come from the deep res that have, really good language skills, comprehension skills, but then we get other students that are from across the country who have little to no language skills that have come specifically to Navajo Prep to learn these things. And so even though we say fundamental, we had to create programs and lessons and units to address the needs of all our students, especially those that, haven't had any of these things. So this is one area that also asked for support from our 21st century coordinator. In the evening time last year and through the COVID years, we did have online Zoom courses where students would take part in, let's say, we're going to learn our colors today, And again, this is knowledge that a lot of our students have already taken with previous courses, especially in the BIE schools. But a lot of our students don't have that. And so we gave that extra support during that time. And so, these are, so you'll see 4-6 language standard concept, introduction of clans. And so you see the standard from Navajo Nation, and then the unit title, and then just a brief description of what students are going to be doing. Next slide. So over the 2 years now, we've had to create our own curriculum. I mean, I don't know how many times the school has done that before, because I have old binders, that have just been archived. And looking through them, you started to see with our other teachers, that might be a little outdated. That might not be as needed now. Maybe this is a focus that we need. So we really started to pick and choose what we wanted to teach our students, what our students needed to learn now, and the best possible ways of instruction for them. And so we did this pacing guide. We did this for Navajo 1, 2, 3, and 4 last year. And so this is what we've implemented. And you'll see the colors there: white, blue, yellow, black, quarter 1, quarter 2, 3, and 4, still following that idea of thinking, planning, action, and reflection. And so, no, this pacing guide is specifically to Navajo Prep that we've created. So first week, we went over syllabus review, but we started to, one of the biggest things was that we really needed was transitioning from one unit to another. Because sometimes, we introduce vocabulary concepts or vocabulary in one unit, but we don't use it in the next unit. So how do we ensure that the vocabulary learned in this unit, we get to use the next unit? And how do we use it in the units following it? So that students don't just learn it one time and forget, but we're building on top of these units. We're building on top so that students will understand vocabulary flow. Next one. Next slide. Then we did a pacing guide. This is something that I know a lot of our BIE schools are familiar with. I know a lot of schools implement this. This was really for us to structure those concepts of learning. So you'll see introduce, reinforce, support, demonstrate, and assess for a lot of these standards. And I believe this is for the language 1 and 2. So at the very top left-hand corner, you have quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, but we also go by semester. So semester 1, semester 2. And so in introducing a new concept, what are we introducing first? What skill are we introducing? Navajo is very heavily verb-based. And so that was something we wanted to introduce and reinforce throughout the year. What are some other things we wanted to introduce? Maybe a little bit later, maybe this concept, this language concept needs to be here first. Maybe we need to reinforce it here. And so there was a lot of taking this puzzle, this, I'm gonna use the analogy, this 5,000 piece puzzle, and they're all shades of black, gray, and white, and having to try and put that in an order to where it made sense for us as teachers, that would be the best possible strategy for our students to learn Navajo. Next slide.
And if I can add in,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that one thing that's really powerful about this, especially for me as a non-native person, as school staff, one of our school leaders, what I've seen is that vision isn't just created, but it's also shared. And so the time is taken to really explain the process and the outline with our board, with other school leaders, with other decision makers, parents, students. And so there's really a shared vision and a shared understanding as to not just taking these language classes, but really what the outcome is expected to be and what it's hoped to be. And I think that shared vision and the work of really getting people on board and really moving in the same direction with this work is that it's created some really amazing opportunities, and it's opportunities that get approved really quickly because everyone has the same understanding of why this is so important, how we're going about doing this. New courses have been created, like the traditional material arts course that was implemented, or our UNM dual credit class that was implemented. And so these classes have come about in a way that supplements a lot of the foundational work that's seen here in the pacing guides and throughout the standards. I don't know, Kevin, if you have anything else to add about that.
Oh, no, that was it. Yeah, next slide. So this is an example of our Danat Bazad Ab Initio 1 theme. This is the blue, so this would be the second one. And in here, what we've had to do is redesign redefine, revise what we've created and fitting it into this IB thematic model, this framework. And it has been difficult. Change is always going to be difficult, but it's possible. When we look at the IB program, we're constantly pressuring them to ensure that they recognize our Dene language so that students can be able to take Dene, Bazat, Ab Initio. So what we're doing now is we've created this framework, we've created the themes, we've created the units, and we're implementing it now so that we show that we're prepared for this. And so this is what just a really quick unit plan looks like, or unit, just the thematic unit looks like. So for experiences, daily routine, leisure, experiences, and festivals. So we look at those 4 things, and then we try to create unit from those. Again, you're not going to hit all of them, but you are going to be able to use that and again build on it in the next unit. So if we're talking about time, traditional time telling, so you have a unit where you can do the Western way of telling time. You know, currently right now, I'm in Vegas and it's 11:36. So where Miss Tabram's at is 12:36. Where Olani is based at is going to be, what is it, 2:36 right now? And so, but using the Dene way of telling time, right now, the sun is almost peak, right? So we would say, and telling time via the movement of the sun and how much light is outside. And so that is something in that unit, okay? Dara, do you want to say anything about IB?
Yeah, sure. So Naval Prep is an international baccalaureate world school. And for us, this has been a really important curriculum or framework. It's not a curriculum, but it's a framework and a designation that's helped us to really move into inquiry-based learning. And it's also helped us to create more projects and really support, I guess, teacher-driven assessments within our school. So right now we have the diploma program that we offer, and we're adding in another program called the middle years program. So our students sit and compete for these really challenging, very selective diplomas called the International Baccalaureate Diploma. And so as we've kind of prioritized our commitment to the International Baccalaureate, but also our founding purpose and school commitment to Navajo language and culture, we've worked to kind of really push the International Baccalaureate to recognize Navajo language as one of the required classes, so that our students don't have to choose between courses. So in addition to doing a lot of the internal work of ensuring our students have access to these resources, our school is also really pushing from a global perspective of, hey, our language needs to be recognized as a course requirement for this international diploma. And Kevin's really taken the lead on a lot of that advocacy. We do think that the inquiry-based learning and approach to the International Baccalaureate supports our school's commitment to learning, in that it really promotes sovereignty and independence for students, that they have the chance to truly engage and question the curriculum. And so that it's been another really important part of our professional development to ensure that all of our language teachers are trained in these kind of the International Baccalaureate framework, so that they're working on creating units and aligning their teaching style to some of these like globally recognized methods.
Yeah. So when we talk specifically about assessment, IB has a very strict assessment. And when we take what IB is created as assessment, what Navajo Nation is asking us for their assessment, it's night and day of what they expect. And again, we can't discuss or disclose any part of those assessments. But again, what we're navigating to try to do is merge these two assessment styles so that our students are prepared not just for one or the other, but for both, but also give them those experiences of truly assessing their knowledge, not just teaching to the exam or teaching to the test, but to really ensure that they are prepared as lifelong language learners. And so when we look at the structure for this, the language culture teachers is on the left, the Nevazad is on the right. And again, we try to keep them separate because in one, for the language teacher, I'll get to that, but instruction per year is 108 hours. Over the course of 4 years, if they take Navajo all 4 years, that's 436 hours. 436 hours. So that's not nearly enough for a student to become proficient, which is why we also include our other elective courses. We have a Dene language, Dene history and government course, the traditional material course, and we also employ our after school 21st century program with our culture Wednesdays and our to help support that, our residential advisors and our classroom without walls experiences, so that students are gaining those additional hours of language learning. Right now, the language teachers are focusing on their standard thematic units to create our own NPS curriculum. When we talk about assessments, instructors create study guides for their pre, post, and mid assessment. I'm sorry. They create study guides for the mid and post assessment. And what that does is they know what units they covered. They understand the vocabulary that they covered. So then they hand off that study guide, what the student got for their study guide, they hand it to me. They administer the language 1 through 4 assessments. On my side, what I do as the Nevazad director, I create the curriculum, help to build that framework, help to create those pacing guides, working with them. I give them professional development. We go on other professional developments. But the main thing, at least assessment-wise, is I create the assessments, which, again, the focus is unbiased assessment. And we'll get to that in a little bit. And then I do record keeping and data tracking for our teachers. So we're ensuring that a senior dad graduated, we have information from them as best as we could from 4 years ago when they were here. Our current cohorts last year and students, our freshmen from last year and our freshmen from this year, we have data on pre, mid, and post now. So we're keeping, really, it's a lot of work to collect, but also interpreting that data so that our teachers can, what areas of improvement do we need? What areas did they do well on, and so on and so forth. Next slide. So when we look at our Dene language curriculum guide to proficiency, this is our roadmap. So in Dene language 1, we focused on fundamental reading, writing, syntax. And a whole lot of debate on this, even within our own community of Navajo. What's the best approach? Do we do full immersion? What do we do? What exactly is the best approach, And so what we did at Navajo Prep is created our own roadmap for ourselves, our own map. And so when we first start off, we do believe that reading and writing is important, understanding that syntax. So at the beginning of the year, teachers will speak about 20% Navajo. And then over the course of the year, move to 40% Dene language instruction. So that's why you'll see that 20-40. Then we move to Dene language 2, oral comprehension and syntax mastery. So here we get to where students know SOV, subject, object, verb, sentence structure. And in that, at this point, by the end of their Dene language 2, they're going to master how to say a sentence in Navajo. They are going to understand that the verbiage is always going to be at the end, and expanding on that verb is going to be our next priority. But in here, again, oral comprehension. Now students are really focusing on understanding. We get students beginning of the year, it takes 2 minutes, for roughly 2 minutes. If you say a sentence, right? And to a person who's never heard Navajo, they're gonna think, I don't even know what that is, right? But to our students, they're gonna sit there and think, okay, that's your grandpa. So they're talking about my grandpa. See, they have to conjugate that. And then they're gonna be able to say, Lechan, whose dog? Well, why are we talking about a dog? Whose dog? Leche, but Lechan, oh, my chase. So it takes roughly 2 minutes. For some students, it might take a little less, right? But by the end of the year, it's gonna be quicker, maybe 10, 15, 20 seconds, okay? And again, 40% Navajo beginning of the year, 60% towards the end of the year. And again, the language 3 is conversational learning and acquisition. So we're here 60%, 80%. And language 4 is we're really pushing for community engagement and practicum, which might change a little bit this year because we are going to, it might change, but again, 80 to 100% at the end of the year. When we look at our whole curriculum in general, we have foundations of Navajo culture, Navajo philosophy, Navajo history, government, Navajo culture with dual credit course at Salwan College. We now have Navajo fiber arts, which is now meshed together with Navajo material arts for TMA. Okay, so that's a two-year course for our freshmen and sophomores that they can choose to take. We also did that UNM residential dual credit course where they went over the history of residential schools, and that was a pilot program that we had the opportunity to be a part of. Next slide. So what does assessment look like for us? So we have generally at the very bottom skill-based assessment. You see that those bubbles with how they go over. So skill-based assessment is our pre-test in August that takes place in August. Generally, it is going to be multiple choice. Okay, skill-based assessment is what most people consider real low-level, assessment style, right? It's just multiple choice. But what we do over the course of the year to mid-year, we then go to concept-based assessment, oral comprehension, and you'll see some of those assessment, those questions, and what we do in the next few slides. Then at the end of the year, what we're moving to, what we did do this year, or we just introduced it this year, but next year it's going to be part of the assessment process, is performance-based assessment. This is in May, where they give an oral performance written essay. So this year they did a PowerPoint presentation that they had to do. They had to interview people about a cultural concept, and then they presented it in a PowerPoint, and they had to be at least 50% Navajo, okay? So over the year, for all grades, the now 1, 2, 3, and 4 are gonna follow this here, okay? But again, throughout the entire school year, we have diagnostic assessment, which is assessment before learning. We have ipsative assessments, which assessment as learning. Then summative assessment, which is an assessment of learning, and then we have formative assessments throughout the year, throughout the day, every day, week, whatever it is an assessment for learning. And so we've taken these concepts, these big theories, right, and we've embedded it into our assessment taking here, our assessment process here. So next slide. So this is an example of one of the teachers, the language 2 study guide. So this is their final. And in the beginning, dialogue paragraph, students have to read that, and then they have to comprehend, and we'll ask questions about it. So yola sami dane ya yana naisni. I'm sorry, it's a very small screen. I'm trying to look for it. Yola dane ashklatin peso ye naisni yola tosata peso topa. So there's one or two ways that we could do this. In the beginning, students can read it, and then we assess them. Or what I'm starting to do is create video clips or audio clips, and students hear it. Okay, and I'll show you what that looks like a little bit later. Verb conjugation. You can see this is a simplified version of verb conjugation for us as Navajo. I will eat, and this is I eat, we two eat, we all eat, you eat, those two eating, those three eating, he, she, it, they are eating, those two are eating, and they all are eating. And so that's the simple 9 verb tenses for all our verbs, right? But again, this is currently. Then we have I am eating, or I will eat. I ate yesterday, or ate 20 minutes ago. And so you have your past, present. And so it does get very complicated. And this is the focal point of all of our students learning. And you can see that they have little charts here for the students, and you get to see again more verb conjugation to walk around at nasha, nate, ash, nate, kai. And this, I believe the study guide was about 9-10 pages long. And so students go through this. Students they go to the tutor, they ask their residential advisors, they ask myself, they ask and try to really practice these verbiage throughout the school day, throughout the school year, and helping to really understand, not just learn it for the exam, but to really understand it as part of their language learning process. Next slide. So these are example questions of that put into these are just examples level of assessment. So I've categorized our question types into these categories. Okay, so level 1A, at the very top you have the question in English, and then you have the answer choices. Again, drag and drop. All these assessments students take online via our Edulastic program. So students time according to the clock, drag and drop the right answer into the correct time. So when we look at it, it is 5:10, right? That is the question. So then students will now look at there's 5 drop areas. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here. 6. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 answer choices. So they have to be able to put it into the correct order for them to get the answer correct. Okay. Sometimes, we can be a little bit harsh in it to where they have to get full points. They will need to match the exact answer. But that's more for our finals. Most of the time for our pre and mid, partial answers are taken. Okay. But for finals, generally we'll tell students this question here needs to be an exact match. Next question. Level 1B. So now, again, it's I think I got these two mixed up. So the first one is English, and then or English, and then 1B is English to NAVO, English NAVO, or vice versa. So here's that Doty standard at the very top. I will demonstrate a sacred teaching of a bird insect. Then you have your question. In the history of the Diné people and emergence, what insect burrowed into forest world and passed the arrow test? And so you'd sit here and look through, is this cicada, is it badger, bear, gopher, tobacco, and bluebird? One of the way we had to really make this a little bit more rigorous, when students guess, right? Because students will just start guessing at some point. If you do four choices, I believe I don't remember exactly what the term was, but again, they're going to get close to about 40-50% when they start to guess, right? But if you start to include more answers, that percentages goes low. Again, we're not doing it to be mean. We're doing it so that they do hit the give their best answer. And if they're not, and if they are guessing, it shows a low percentage. Next question or next slide. Level 2A now is the question is going to be Navajo. And the answers will be in English. Next slide. Same thing again, level B, where now the questions in Navajo with the multiple choice answers in Navajo. So Josh E Najmihi space nanana be nanana fa nanana ye nanana ya nanana. And so I know they do look similar, right? Again, the tone of how it's spoken and what it's saying. Keep in mind the BBY rule. This is one of the nuances that our teacher uses, our Navajo Language 1 teacher uses, and students know what this means, BBY. So they're looking at the verb nanene. Which one of these postpositions, because we're doing spatial postposition. Be means with, ba means for, ye means with, ya means for. Jos islan nehe. ya, be, na, na, na. And so students will start to think through the question and answers. Okay. Well, honestly, we'll take a pause after this section for your questions. Okay. Questions. I think there's 2 of them. Do you collect data of families? What is percent of the net speaking at home? We do send out a survey to our incoming freshmen beginning of the year. And 4 years ago, we saw that there were quite a bit of homes that did speak Navajo. But last year, when we sent out the survey, that number each year is progressively going lower. Right now, our students, when the question is asked, does your father speak Navajo at home? And it'll say often, all the time, often. There's 5. There's that bar, mom, brother, sister, grand, whatever it may be. Again, 4 years ago it was pretty high, but we are starting to see it dwindle down. So we don't have an exact answer on this, but we do have some figures for that. I do believe our registrar does send a questionnaire home, but most times that questionnaire is, do you speak Navajo at home? Yes or no. With the students, we get their parents' response and students' responses. Kimberly Zaw, how do you differentiate speakers of Navajo language that come from Western versus students that are from Eastern Agency? This is a really big question. This is a really big thing that we get often. And we've spoke with Dr. Malvitia Chi with UNM, and this is our stance, is that we do not have a dialect within the Navajo Nation. There is no dialect. I believe dialects, and what in our discussions and research is that dialects is often used as a political thing sometimes. And so, yes, there is some words that we use that are different, that are specific to region, even to family. That is not a dialect, but we do use the example, like when we say the word bread, ba. Ba is just a general term for bread, right? Then we go to fire bread, then we go to tortilla. Tortilla is probably the most interesting one because it has 4, 5, 6 different names. What is the other one? I don't remember. Then we go to yeast bread, and then we get to, I believe there's a bread that smells really yeasty. What is it called? Sourdough. So when a student takes their vocabulary and they go home and grandpa says, this is how we say it, we encourage our students to bring back that word to our teachers, and then we discussed it. That was one that we found with bati question for yeast bread or a sourdough bread, because we would never have thought about that. And then even though the word dikosh has some negative connotation to it, but it's referring to the fermentation process. And so that's a word that, a specific region may use. I believe that was Pinyon, that they use that for sourdough and yeast dough. And again, we tell our students, all right, this is what we're incorporating now into our vocabulary. All our students are going to learn it, okay? Same thing with yas versus za, right? And so what we tell our students is yas comes from the sky, yas, za is on the ground. Then we say nichid, and so we tell our students that before weathermen would get on the news, or before we would get Google alerts or Apple alerts, whatever, we'd have to rely on our expertise as weathermen and identify what kind of snow is coming towards us, right? Because sometimes we use jokingly the in-law chasers as part of our weather telling techniques. And so again, those aren't dialects, but those are regional areas or regional variations of vocabulary that we do embed into our curriculum and also incorporate as part of vocabulary.
But Lynn, I think what you're saying, like you're kind of getting at this really important component of how we frame learning at Navajo Prep. And I think you highlighted it really well in this, this idea that that part of the way we teach at Navajo Prep, and I think it's not just in language, but it's across the school, is that it's not that there's one right way or one wrong way. It's asking students the question of, well, where did you learn that? Is that true? Who is that true for? Where did that come from? And so it's connecting that content knowledge to identity and to place and to individual experiences. And that's kind of a lot of what we've done through the International Baccalaureate as well. We offer a class called The Theory of Knowledge, and it's almost like a philosophy class where you have to start digging and seeing, if that is the truth, then why do I believe it? And I think that way of thinking at our school has permeated into the way our students relate to each other. And if you're familiar with Navajo Prep, you know that a lot of our students come from all over. We have our buses will go 4 hours out, 4 hours back to bring students. Some students come as far as 7 hours away, Phoenix, Albuquerque. We have students from Montana, Idaho. So students come from all over the Four Corners and beyond to attend Navajo Prep. And one of the most special things is those conversations that they start to have. Oh, you make your bread like this, or wait, how do you say that? Why? And so there's a great deal of grace that students and I think by extension our teachers have with each other, as there's a genuine curiosity about each other's cultural knowledge.
Thank you, Dar. Level 3 assessment. Level 3. Now we're starting to get to read the paragraph, answer the question in English. So it is a lot for our students to do, but question types for them. And I believe we timed this.
Oh, it seems like we might have lost Kevin.
Kevin, we can't hear you. And I'm sorry, I can't read this slide. Oh, we can't hear you.
You can?
Now we
Now
can. You're good.
Okay.
Kevin, I was
my
like, I can't read this slide.
Yeah, my microphone, I think my earbud is starting to go, but it's fine. And so students would read this paragraph. We've timed it to how a proficient reader will read this paragraph and the time that it takes. And so we incorporate that into the assessment, how many minutes the assessment will be. And so what is the weather like in Farmington? So if a person was just trying to look for the answer, they're going to be looking for Farmington. So we're at in this paragraph is Farmington. And again, having to search for a specific answer, it takes longer. So it's going to reflect in their overall answer choice, their overall score at the end. And because right here it says, so saying this day at Gallup, it is sunny, right? They're going to see that and read that and be, oh, no, that's not Farmington. They're going to have to read through, okay? It's easier for them to read through, and we'll have about 5 questions with the exact same paragraph, and that they have to, there'll be certain specific questions there. And these aren't gotcha questions. If a proficient reader takes the time to read this, they're going to be able to understand, you know, what is the weather like in Farmington? Oh, I read that right here. Okay, so it is going to be sunny. There you go, right? And when they read it through once, then the following questions will get a little bit easier to complete. Next slide. Level B, now it's Navajo, and it's going to be Navajo here. Navajo answers. And so this is saying Bobby Hatiyas Chin. So right here it says She'e Robert Yinshia. And then the answer goes through here. Shema'e Rebecca will get She'e Bobby will get. Okay. Now Bobby is the father. My dad is Bobby. He is from, I believe this was Pistes, it's a community south of Shiprock, but it doesn't say his clan. Okay, that's the important thing is Shajae Bobby Waliya. But the question is asking, what is Bobby's clan? What is his father's clan? So now it gets the student thinking, okay, Bobby, Yaschin. So now they look at Robert, Yanshia. So the son is Robert. His mom is Hashklishni. His dad's first clan is Twitchini, Bitterwater. Okay, no, okay. Now this is the mom's father. Oh, here's my father's father. He's Nahopani. So the question would be G. The answer would be G. Okay. Again, it is not gotcha questions. It is strategically comprehension focused questions for our students. And so that's level B. Next slide. So level 4 is going to be these, what do they call them? Audio and video clips, okay? This is just an audio clip. And again, it's a paragraph or 2 paragraphs, and the student has to listen to it. Again, there's no cue, there's no paragraph to look to. It is all oral comprehension, and the student can listen to this. Generally, the recordings are 1 minute to 2 minutes long. And the students have to, here's a question. Why did the 2 people go and visit? Okay. And so they're going to have to listen through that audio. They're going to have to identify where exactly they're visiting, who's going to visit, those types of questions. And so this does take a lot of time. It takes me about 2 days to complete one study guide. So it does take a long time. Thankfully, the Edulastic program keeps a bank of all the questions. So all I need to do is copy a question, change it, maybe add in different questions or what it needs to be. But again, I believe our Edulastic program now, last time I checked, we have over 600 questions in our question bank. And so they're very distinct. Some of them are in sections, but again, it just takes a lot of time to create these questions and to always think about what level are we going to assess, how we're going to assess this. We've already, like, maybe I'll throw in a few level 1 in the post assessment, but again, not going to be very many. Okay. Those are what they call softballs. It's real easy to hit type of stuff. But then again, we're going to focus heavily on these assessments, these level 4 assessments. Next question, or next slide. So looking at biases, this was something that I got from training and professional development when I visited our IB conference, language conference. And one of the biggest things we've always faced as educators when taking state assessments or taking national assessments is these biases. So So in our assessment, how are we going to create this assessment question? So in our questions, you'll see Bobby, Billy, Batsili, Benali, right? It's just a random name, but it's a Navajo name, a name that our students will recognize. Another one's Benjamin Bluehouse. That's the name of our teddy bear, our Dene language culture teddy bear that we use. But again, the students named them Benjamin Benali. And so those names that are recognizable within our community. Spaces is another one. I'm pretty sure none of you guys, maybe a few of you guys, ever heard of City Market or well, maybe City Market's a national one, but Bashas is locally to Arizona and some locations in New Mexico. But again, students will recognize that, right? And other trading posts, other areas in and around the community. Relationship, heavily focusing on using our Dene kinship terms, right? Linguistic markers is really a really heavy focus of ours. There is no correct way or perfect way of reading and writing Navajo, but we do try our best to make it so that it is something that our students, won't have to say, why is it said here when so-and-so teaches it this way, okay? That's one probably the biggest things with our 3 language teachers and myself is how do we get on the same page so that one teacher isn't writing it this way versus the other way, okay? Socioeconomic markers is one thing, I think in previous exams, when I overlooked and saw a question one time on a national assessment, I can't say anything further than that, but it was asking a question about a sailboat. And in our area of New Mexico, there's very little sailboats, right? And if you have a sailboat, you probably have to be intensely rich and going to Page, Lake Powell to go out on the lake or whatnot. Okay, there's very little sailboats. We have boats, but again, that's something that distinguishes that socioeconomic market, and we try not to incorporate something like that. Okay. Gender is often difficult because we do have populations of LGBTQ within our staff and students, and how to respect those identities. So in Navajo, most oftentimes it is gender neutral. Okay, that's why I would say Navajo has always been gender neutral. But when it comes to saying my grandma, you know, those are gender specific, but most of the time we try to keep it to just them. Okay, and Navajo's already like that. Them, they. There is no he or she unless you specifically say that man. Okay. Roles within the community, roles as grandparents. One of the things with our nation and a lot of people across the world, grandparents fill in that parental role, and so we'll include that as best as we can to where it's not negative, not necessarily a negative, but we'll try to work with that because a lot of our students are living in that situation, which is fine. Navajo specific activities, the family structure, identity distinction. So when creating these questions, when creating these paragraphs, when creating everything of this assessment, each of these bubbles have to be filled before we create that question. And so it is time consuming. It burns your brain at the end of the day. So next question, next slide.
But I think what it does when you go through all of that work, especially regarding assessment and bias, is it creates a safe place for students to learn. And it creates the space for them to feel welcome within the curriculum and within the school setting. So like the language shift with gender, the language shift with families versus saying parents and guardians, all of those things are things that create a sense of safety and home for students, because we have so many reasons why students might feel apprehensive or nervous to try to speak their language. And it's things that these teachers and staff are doing to create that extension of opportunity for students. It's really essential to helping them stay in it and to continue to attempt and try within the coursework.
Yeah, thank you. With our assessment, how we identify, where a student's at. I know the colors, if you work in a BIE system, you'll notice blue is the highest, green is proficient, yellow is nearing, orange, red, and black. So this is a very familiar thing, okay? Because a lot of our students come from BIE schools, this is something they're accustomed to. We try to change it, but I think for the most part, this is where, this is something they're most familiar with. But what we did change is how we identify it, and we changed it to where it's a culturally appropriate way of assessing them, of where a student will assess where they're at. Okay, so if we start in black is not necessarily a bad color for us as Diné people. Black generally will entail that it's a starting point of darkness, right? You can't see what's out there just yet. So so we tell our students you're on a journey to the top of a mountain. So this is where they're just starting their journey of learning. Then go to dark gray. They can hear it. They hear the sounds now. And one of the things in our class is that the first week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month that the language teacher focuses on is the Navajo alphabet, because students can't say it. If they can't properly pronounce it, then they're probably not hearing it. And if you do assessments with little kids, which I've done when I've worked at the K-5, I ask one of the students, what does Navajo sound like to you? And that little student says, it sounds like to me. And it just made me think, like, they can't hear it. They don't distinguish the sound. And so now they're distinguishing the sound. Light gray, meaning they stood up. Now they're confident. They're starting to show a little bit more confidence. Ikiniya, now they're moving forward. They're moving forward language journey. Gosh, meaning now they see the first mountain. They see the mountain. They understand it's there. They understand they need to become proficient. They need to understand. Now they see that goal in mind. Gosh, meaning they see it now. They can see the mountain. They're almost reaching it. Yaniya, meaning they've reached the mountain, but they haven't climbed it yet. They reached the base. Haya, they're climbing up that mountain. Yakahaya, they've reached the top of that mountain. And so this is how we present where our students at on their linguistics journey, using our traditional mountain teachings as a way of as an analogy for their learning. So beginning of the year, this is what we see, okay? Most students, this is freshmen, will come in with little to no Navajo, okay? This pie chart, grays and reds. Beginning of the year, we see no more blacks, no more dark grays, maybe some light gray reds, but look how much color is here. Towards the end of the year, this is what we want to see and hope to see and expect. Next slide. Oh, shoot, I don't. Go ahead and go back really quick. Right there we go. So this is our Delenn language proficiency for our seniors. So beginning of their freshman year, this is back when they're freshmen here. No, beginning of the year. No, I think this is their beginning of their freshman year. I'm sorry, this is the beginning of their freshman year. You see a lot of blacks, grays, and some reds, very little proficiency, okay? This was their mid-year, beginning of, this is beginning of senior year, okay? So we still have some students that are black, that are in darkness, okay? That could be a number of things, right? We have 2 students there, 5, and again, it's over the summer, they lost a lot of the language. It was also coming out of COVID, there was the instruction was not as at the level that we wanted it to be, but we still have a lot of color here. With our seniors now, why is the coloring off? I'm not sure why the coloring's off. But we're starting to see again that the assessment does get progressively difficult over the years, okay? So we do see in this, this is not the correct coloring, I'm sorry. This is not the correct pie chart. We did see 3% was blue, there was green, there was a lot of yellows in this area here. I'm not sure why this is not the correct pie chart, but we again over the oh wait, hold on, I'm sorry. This is not this is the assessment from the Navajo Nation that they give us. So this is a 2-part examination, comprehension, and an oral exam. But again, I can't discuss the details of the examination. So this is the examination that the Navajo Nation gave us, okay? Next chart. Our internal assessment, again, DLPA assesses, there's a different assessment, our internal one, okay? So this is with our seniors. I'm sorry, this is the chart I was explaining. There's a big chunk, which is IB students. IB students don't get assessed. Beginning of the year, blacks, grays, reds, but again, mid-year, starting to see more color. By the end of the year, there's red still, approaching, bridging, expanding, proficient. So you're seeing a lot more growth in our students. We also really pride ourselves because a lot of these students did not have or had very little Navajo classes. When we do our surveys, we often ask how many Navajo classes you have in middle school. And again, these students come from such a wide spectrum that some students maybe had 3 or 4 classes of Navajo. Some had 1. There was a student who I'm really proud of. She's from Phoenix. No Navajo whatsoever. Parents moved, and she wanted to come here and she learned Navajo. She's at approaching 22%, which is not very far. But again, in her language journey from no Navajo beginning of the year, beginning of her freshman year, to now the senior, she can introduce herself. She can talk about her parents. She can talk and understand Navajo conversations that are going around here. Her vocabulary has expanded. Okay. And so this is where our seniors are at right now when we did our post assessment. Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I do have a question that I think is maybe important for us as we're explaining, like, from your perspective, how have you balanced the internal assessments that you and our language team created with the external assessments from the Department of Diné Education that have been kind of brought into the school? And what's the relationship between those assessments?
So the external assessments focus heavily on oral speaking skills. That's where, our students aren't there yet. Some are. If you go back, I'm sorry, Alana, could you go back to that pie chart? Yeah, that one. So the main assessment that they have is, again, oral language speaking. Our children are the students speaking Navajo yet. And that's their heavy focus. And again, we already know we're not going to have those numbers. But looking at it holistically, is the student understanding versus just memorizing language phrases? Or we really don't want to teach to the excessive. We could, those numbers would probably be a lot higher if we did. But again, we really want to focus on the students' holistic journey. So if you go back to the next chart, that chart afterwards, the pie chart, this is what we're proud of, because our students are moving forward on their journey. Okay. Again, Navajo is a difficult language. In our language surveys, we ask our students, some don't want to learn Navajo, some students feel that it's necessary. It's where they're at, where they want to be at with this. We get a lot of our students that are not Navajo. We do have, Anglo students. We did have African American student last year. They're probably in approaching, bridging, and expanding sections that I've seen. So again, they're learning really well alongside their Navajo. Next slide. Here's all of our students across the board, beginning of the year, black, grays, reds, right? Heavily black, grays, reds. But then mid-year, you're starting to see a lot more color. Now, end of the year, all of our students, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, very little grays, reds, but it's balanced with the yellows and oranges and the greens and blues. So we're starting to see progress with our students, because again, Navajo is difficult. Learning any language is difficult, but where our students are moving at, each year that pie chart begins to, there's more blues and greens and yellows, okay? Because if we had done this 4 years ago, it probably would not have been this colorful. Next slide. Requirements of high quality assessment. You intend to assess learning and assess memory. Reliability, learning outcomes in line with grades you give. So your assessment is fair, objective, unbiased. Are your assessment transparent? Because we take the students the study guide and we tell them this is exactly what's going to be on the exam, they're prepared for it. Because remember, teachers took their study guide from what they've taught. So there's no gotcha questions. There's no, well, you learned this last year, you should be able to use those skills on that from last semester that's going to be assessed, maybe integrated somewhere in a question randomly. No, we're not going to do that. Okay. But we do tell students, like, what you learned in freshman year, Shama, Nama, my mom, your mom, their mom, that's going to always be reinforced throughout the years. Assessments are transparent and public at the beginning of the course. We tell our students, this is what is going to be assessed. When we do admissions, last year we administered a pre-assessment to our incoming freshman class. We didn't do that this year, but we are going to start to do this and be consistent in the years following. So our incoming freshmen are aware of what's expected of them in these classes. We don't want to scare them. But again, it is frightening for our students, and we get that through our surveys. Next slide. Our curriculum's ever evolving. Like I said, in the 4 years I've been here, each year has been a different framework, a different pacing guide. And with IB now, it's going to be totally different again. So I have to redesign. Our program is expanding internally from just 2 teachers and a tutor. We've now expanded to 5, 6 staff members, and we're including all departments now. So it's not just us alone on a boat. We're bringing in every department. DLC programs is reaching out to local schools and other organizations. Again, 700 unique questions on our exam. Most questions can be reused for specific grade levels. Digital exams do take longer to create, but again, over time, they become more accessible. Next slide. There we go, questions. I'm sorry about that, thank you.
Okay, so if you have any questions, you can go ahead and share them in the chat or in the Q&A. We'll just wait a moment to give you time to put your questions and or comments. You can also share maybe something that you are doing, or maybe a strategy or a tool that was shared that you thought was like really interesting and you may want to integrate into your assessment. I'll just wait a couple seconds to see if there's any questions.
And maybe as we wait, if I can just add one comment. It was really with the support of the OIE, we received the NAL grant in 2020, and that's how we really started moving forward in developing the position that Mr. Bullen now has. And we were really excited for that funding source to kind of jumpstart some of these initiatives, but they were already really set in place, and the work was already being done. But it was that funding that allowed us to kind of ensure that there was a designated position and person to do all this work. I do want to shout out, especially as some of us, I mean, we're all here at the OIE Project Director Conference, so we know that there's always additional funding that is being sought after. So we were able to secure additional funding from the Public Education Department of New Mexico. And that was a really wonderful resource for us to continue some of our programs after the NAL grant ended in 2020. So even though we're not an MPED funded school, we were still able to get funding through that department. So I would really encourage you all to look there if you're interested in additional funding sources beyond OIE to maintain and implement some of your programs.
Awesome. So if you have, maybe you can't think of a question now, but you can always reach out. Here's their contact information. I want to thank our 2 presenters. That was amazing. I hope you guys got like some amazing hints, some processes. You can really see how their assessment is really connected to their drive around their native language, and how it permeates all different aspects of the landscape of their educational program. Just to wrap it up, I want to let you know what's coming up next. We will be having the last networking session in about 10 minutes. So please, go and join in. I know there is one on native language, and so you might want to check that out to continue this discussion. Also, take time to jump on the social wall, chat on the discussion board. Also, if you would complete the survey that gives us really good feedback on how this session was, and it will help us to not only improve this session, but also like moving forward with future project directors meetings, or even talking circles, and any of the other TA that we provide. And then if you have any other questions or follow-up, you can again email the OIE TA team at oie@seiservices.com. Thank you again to Kevin and Dara for your presentation and sharing the amazing work that you are doing. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you later. Take care.